So again, to stay with the book, we will go through some of these things to build the big history of human evolution and come back to health. This is a figure that's showing extinction rate versus time. So we are going from the Cambrian, so Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Cambrian, and so on, millions of years to the present. And we have obviously had many major extinctions along the way, as we know. The Great Dying was one of the largest ones, and then we had the Triassic-Jurassic one, and then the meteorite crash, as far as we know. Some debate continues, and the demise of the dinosaurs and the emergence of mammals. So one has to see how the extinction events would have affected overall biodiversity as well. When large extinctions happen for various reasons, like the meteorite crash, plate tectonics, you have the flood basalt events that last as volcanic events for millions of years, and so on and so forth. And then we have within that the context of what we have gone through in terms of cooling glacial period over the last ice age, which started about 115,000 years ago and ended about 18,000 years ago. So we have data. This is the 100,000 year cycle we can see in the ice cores from Antarctica, and we can obviously, this has now been extended almost to 1 million years, 800,000 years and longer. And you can see the cooling that has happened there, and the question is whether we were supposed to go back into the next ice age and whether we have modified it by our anthropogenic fossil fuel burning and greenhouse gas land use activities, which have been the cause for global warming. So there are lots of details here in terms of climate processes of why these cooling periods are much slower than these abrupt warming periods, which is of interest, of course, because global warming is in this phase and not in the cooling phase. So we have to be careful about that in terms of the potential for abrupt changes, which we will see again in a little bit more detail later on. So in that context, evolution of the Homo genius itself, we can start with the our ancestors, Old World, New World monkeys, glacial epochs starting in the Miocene, going from 23 to 5.3 million years ago, which some people consider an analog for the present. Great apes evolved, hominins split from the chimpanzee lineage around 5 million years ago, and then we have the things we saw before in terms of bipedalism, cranium, gut size, and other slow evolutions of language, cave art, opposable thumbs, etc. Right? So the Homo genus splits from Australopithecine genus somewhere around here in the Pleistocene, and here we are going into the Holocene. So we are apparently already in the Anthropocene, the name given by Paul Crutzen, a Nobel laureate in chemistry who passed away recently, and so on. But putting that in terms of biodiversity impacts on longer term as well, we can look at this quote from Joseph Hooker, who said, "Every modification of climate, every disturbance of soil, every interference with the existing vegetation of an area favors some species at the expense of others." So mass extinctions themselves, in terms of replacement rates, have been associated with creation of new niches and a general increase of replacement rates and biodiversity overall. So here we are looking at thousands of genera. Typically you don't look at species because specific species may not exist, but even if you find one species of that genera, then you can assume that genera was present, right? So Here are some big 5 mass extinctions, and we are presumably in the 6th mass extinction, as we will see again, and there are other extinction events along the way, and you can see that after each extinction event there is a growth of replacement species, and overall there has been an increase of the biodiversity in terms of the thousands of genera. We are looking at all genera or well-resolved genera in terms of the data availability, but you can see that the rates are that generally there is an increase in biodiversity over this time. So what does it mean for the 6th extinction and human impacts? The rates of change are really fast, faster than the Paleocene-Eocene maximum 55 million years ago, which means such fast rates of change will make some species go extinct. Not all species will adapt, but the question is who survives and whether overall biodiversity increases. So there is a need for longer term context perspective as well, and much has been written about that. So again, taking a quick look at the hominin population in the Middle East over the last 500,000 years. We come out of here of 1 million years ago, about 1 million years ago, with Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, ancestral lineages, and then you have these tree growing here, and then you have parallel growths of Denisovans, Neanderthals. Some interbreeding has happened as well, and the places where we find these evidences, Africa, Levant, which is the Syria, Israel, Jordan, Egypt region, and Eurasia. So you can see Neanderthal, Denisovan introgression happening here, African introgression into Neanderthal ancestral lineage, and these are the various changes in cranium, brain sizes, and so on, Homo sapien ancestral lineages. So it's not always clear why Neanderthals and Denisovans went extinct. For example, Denisovans disappeared before than Neanderthals, which probably survived into as recently as 25,000 years ago, and obviously left some genetic imprint in the current human species. And the migration out of Africa that we looked at before, and the who survives, it can be somewhat determined by looking at genetic technologies. So humans cells carry mitochondrion, which has a separate DNA than the main cell DNA, and mitochondrial DNA can be used as a marker based on two populations. The difference between mitochondrial DNA, I'm being very brief here, you can read up more if you wish, the difference can be seen as a timeline of how long ago they separated. So the evidence that all the Homo sapiens outside of the East African region have one kind of the mitochondrial DNA versus those in East Africa probably means there was a migration, and then the rest of the population was originating from one particular population at some point. And one of the hypotheses is that the Toba eruption around 74,000 years ago probably decimated almost all maybe human species and left two small groups which evolved into multiple species. But there are recent studies by people like Axel Timmerman based on climate modeling which claim that climate pulses drove multiple migrations and so on. Nonetheless, you can see that not directly relating to health, but still related, because we inherited different diseases like diabetes, liver problems, heart problems, etc. from different species related to different locations and different diets and different exposures to pathogens. And so there was climate impact in terms of tropical vectors and their limitation versus extratropical existence and other evolutionary issues and health issues and so on, especially migrating into here. change of ice age, dry periods, survival of the species, and so on. Okay, so talking about end of ice ages, the coming out of the last ice age, which peaked around coldest temperatures around 21,000 years ago, started to warm. Maybe agriculture would have taken off in the Fertile Crescent, and then there was a rapid cooling for a couple of thousand years ago, which is called Younger Dryas, related to a flower in the Arctic Circle which reappeared, which means there was a refreezing, which is related to how the circulation in the ocean changed, the so-called global conveyor belt, which we haven't talked about much, and that would have changed the human existence as well, in terms of the take-holding establishment of agriculture. So agriculture got established, but it wasn't a smooth curve, it wasn't a smooth transition, and the Younger Dryas changed the plants a little, and then we came out of it and came into this stable Holocene period, where little blips have had impacts, like the 8200 event, the greening of Africa, and the Roman periods, medieval warm periods, the Vikings, Little Ice Age, and so on. So agriculture happened over here, and we will look at little more details of those. So we are going rather fast through these time scales. We'll take a step back and forth along the way, but the main point is to get this big history picture of human evolution and vegetation changes, lifestyle changes, speciation of humans themselves, and health along the way, including where they settled and what kind of diseases they would have got, either from vector-borne or infectious diseases transmitting from people to people. Okay,